Tonight, we begin our journey into the timeless lands of ancient Egypt, a realm where life and death intertwined seamlessly, where the river governed existence, and the heavens promised eternity. Before temples rose and pyramids pierced the sky, before mighty pharaohs claimed divine birthrights, it was the Nile that first breathed life into the desert sands. Each year, as if by sacred decree, the Nile swelled and burst its banks. Its floodwaters spread rich silt across the parched earth, turning barren expanses into fertile fields. This annual miracle was not merely a natural phenomenon. To the Egyptians, it was a divine blessing. They called it happy, after the god who personified the life-giving flood. Without the Nile's reliable cycle, their civilization could never have blossomed. From this river came everything: crops, fish, clay for bricks, and even transport routes. The ancient proverb said it best: Egypt is the gift of the Nile. In this cradle of abundance, communities flourished. Small villages grew into bustling towns. Over time, these settlements began to unify, as shared language, culture, and religious beliefs knitted people together. By around 3100 BC, this patchwork of communities merged into two primary regions: Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. Though distinct in character, both regions relied on the Nile as their lifeline. It was only natural that unity would eventually be sought under a single ruler, a divine figure who could bridge the two lands. Legend credits this monumental unification to a man named Narmer, also known as Menes in later traditions. He became the first pharaoh, establishing the first dynasty and founding Memphis, a city strategically positioned where Upper and Lower Egypt met. With a symbolic double crown, Narmer embodied the fusion of the two lands, white for Upper Egypt, red for Lower Egypt. This act of consolidation marked the dawn of what historians call the early dynastic period. With unification came organization. The pharaoh, now seen as a living god on earth, wielded ultimate authority. Beneath him, officials managed agriculture, trade, and law. Scribes recorded harvests, tax collections, and decrees on papyrus, an innovation that allowed ideas to travel and endure. The importance of record-keeping cannot be overstated. Thanks to these scribes, we know much about Egyptian life even millennia later. Religion, too, was woven tightly into this societal fabric. The gods were everywhere: in the sun, in the river, in the animals, and in the stars. Ra, the sun god, sailed across the sky each day in his golden boat, battling darkness to ensure dawn's return. Osiris ruled the underworld, embodying death and resurrection. His wife, Isis, symbolized motherhood and magic, while their son, Horus, became the divine protector of pharaohs. For the ancient Egyptians, the divine was not distant or abstract. It was ever-present, shaping every aspect of their daily lives. Daily life for ordinary Egyptians, however, was simple yet laborious. Farmers worked in tune with the seasons. When the Nile flooded, they took time to repair tools, build homes, or labor on state projects like temples or royal tombs. When the waters receded, planting began. Wheat and barley were staples, used to make bread and beer, the cornerstones of the Egyptian diet. Fruits like dates and figs, along with fish from the Nile, enriched meals. Homes were modest, made from mud brick, with flat roofs where families could escape the heat of the day. Though most Egyptians lived humbly, they shared in a grand vision of eternity. The promise of an afterlife, a paradise where they might reunite with loved ones and enjoy endless abundance, was open to all, provided they lived in accordance with Ma'at, the cosmic order of truth, balance, and justice. Thus, from the banks of the Nile emerged a civilization that married practicality with profound spirituality. It was a land where every birth, every harvest, and every death was but a step on an eternal journey, from the cradle to the crypt, and they believed beyond. As villages became cities and kingdoms united under one crown, Egypt entered an age where divine rule became inseparable from earthly life. The pharaoh, Egypt's supreme ruler, was far more than a mere king. To his people, he was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship and sky, destined to uphold the cosmic order known as Ma'at. In this sacred role, the pharaoh was protector, provider, and judge. From the moment he ascended the throne, the pharaoh bore immense responsibilities. His most sacred duty was to maintain harmony between gods and humans, nature and society, life and death. Rituals were performed daily to ensure the gods remained appeased. Priests, acting on the pharaoh's behalf, conducted ceremonies in temples shrouded in secrecy. Ordinary Egyptians were not permitted to enter the inner sanctuaries, reinforcing the divine distance between the ruler and his subjects. Despite this, the pharaoh's presence permeated every aspect of Egyptian life. His image was carved into temple walls, his name inscribed in cartouches, and his achievements immortalized in grand monuments. Statues depicted him in idealized form, eternally youthful and strong. His authority was absolute, yet bound by religious duty. If the Nile failed to flood or foreign enemies threatened, it was seen as a reflection of the pharaoh's failure to uphold Ma'at. Among the greatest symbols of pharaonic power were the pyramids, colossal tombs built to house the rulers in death. These structures were not mere burial sites, they were gateways to eternity. The most iconic among them, the Great Pyramid of Giza, was constructed during the 4th dynasty under Pharaoh Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops. Rising to unimaginable heights, it stood as a testament to human ambition and divine aspiration. Tens of thousands of laborers, artisans, and engineers worked tirelessly for decades, driven by loyalty, religious conviction, and the hope of earning favor in the afterlife. While the elite enjoyed lives of luxury and ceremony, common Egyptians were not forgotten in this grand cosmic vision. Though their homes were modest and their work demanding, they too saw themselves as part of a divine order. They participated in festivals honoring the gods, offered prayers at local shrines, and lived by principles passed down through generations. Festivals like the Opet, when statues of gods journeyed down the Nile, brought joy and spiritual renewal to all. Music, dance, and feasting united communities under the gaze of the heavens. Education, though limited to a privileged few, played a critical role in sustaining the state. Scribes, trained from boyhood in the intricate art of hieroglyphics, formed the backbone of Egyptian administration. Their records, of harvests, taxes, decrees, and temple donations, preserved the rhythm of Egyptian life with astonishing clarity. To become a scribe was to ascend socially, gaining comfort, influence, and respect in a rigidly stratified society. The military, too, became essential in the pharaoh's service. As Egypt's wealth grew, so did the envy of neighboring lands. Soldiers defended borders and secured valuable trade routes, bringing home riches like incense, gold, cedarwood, and exotic animals. Sometimes conquest expanded the realm itself, as seen during the New Kingdom, when pharaohs like Thutmose III extended Egypt's reach deep into the Levant and Nubia. And yet, beneath all power and splendor, death remained the great equalizer. The pharaoh might command armies and erect pyramids, but he too would face judgment in the underworld. His soul, like those of his subjects, had to pass the ultimate test, the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at. Only if he proved pure and just could he join the gods in the field of reeds, a paradise of eternal peace. Thus, from palace to plough, from temple to tomb, every Egyptian lived in the shadow and grace of the pharaoh, the god on earth who bound heaven and humanity together. Beneath the gaze of towering statues and beneath the unrelenting sun, the heartbeat of Egypt pulsed steadily in the daily lives of its people. For all the grandeur that defined the palaces and temples, the vast majority of Egyptians lived humbler, quieter lives, bound to the rhythms of the land and the Nile's eternal cycle. The day began early, often before dawn broke. Farmers, who made up the backbone of society, rose with the sun. The fertile black soil left behind by the annual inundation of the Nile was their lifeline. Using simple tools, wooden plows, sickles, and shafts to draw water from irrigation channels, they cultivated wheat, barley, flax, and vegetables. Dates, figs, onions, and garlic added variety to their diet, while livestock such as cattle, goats, and ducks supplemented their meals with meat and dairy products. Work was relentless yet predictable. During the months of flooding, when fields lay submerged, many farmers turned to state projects. They became laborers for the pharaoh, helping to erect temples, dig canals, or repair monuments. Contrary to some popular myths, these were not slaves, but rather citizens fulfilling their tax obligations through labor, a practice woven into the social contract. While conditions could be harsh, workers were often provided food, beer, and shelter, along with a sense of pride in contributing to the nation's eternal legacy. In towns and cities, artisans and craftsmen thrived. They carved intricate statues from limestone and granite, painted tomb walls with vivid scenes of gods and everyday pleasures, and fashioned delicate jewelry from gold, turquoise, and lapis lazuli. These skilled laborers worked in organized workshops, many tied to temple complexes or royal commissions. The goods they produced not only beautified sacred spaces but also played critical roles in funerary rites and daily worship. Merchants and traders, meanwhile, animated the marketplaces. Egypt's strategic position made it a hub of commerce, linking Africa, the Near East, and the Mediterranean world. Boats laden with incense from Punt, cedarwood from Lebanon, copper from Sinai, and gold from Nubia sailed along the Nile. Markets bustled with activity as goods were exchanged, taxes collected, and news from distant lands spread by traveling merchants. Women in ancient Egypt enjoyed a level of autonomy uncommon in many other ancient societies. They could own property, initiate divorce, and even run businesses. In households, women managed domestic affairs, prepared food, and raised children. In wealthier families, women sometimes held positions as priestesses or overseers of estates. Queens like Hatshepsut would one day ascend to power themselves, proving that even the highest echelons of authority were not beyond reach. Children were cherished, though their lives were often shaped by practicality. Education, usually reserved for boys destined to become scribes or priests, began early. Those not destined for scholarly paths followed in their parents' footsteps, learning trades, farming, or assisting with household duties. Games, music, and family gatherings brought moments of joy and bonding amid the demands of daily life. Religion was never far from anyone's thoughts. Household shrines honored protective deities like Bes, the dwarf god who warded off evil, or Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess who safeguarded childbirth. Offerings of bread, beer, and incense were common, even among the poor, reflecting a shared desire to maintain harmony with the divine. Life in ancient Egypt was not lived in isolation from the inevitable end. Mortality loomed as a constant presence. Disease, accidents, and the unpredictability of nature ensured that death was familiar, yet never feared as final. Instead, it was seen as a passage, a gateway to another phase of existence. From birth, every Egyptian was subtly preparing for this transition, ensuring their deeds upheld Ma'at so that, when the time came, their journey beyond would be assured. In this land of sun and stone, where life's joys mingled with solemn duties, each soul played its part in an eternal story, a story that stretched far beyond the fleeting boundaries of earthly years. As Egypt's sun blazed over fertile lands and bustling cities, it was within the cool, shaded confines of temples that the nation's soul truly resided. These sacred structures, more than just places of worship, stood as bridges between the mortal and divine realms. They were constructed not for public congregations, but as grand homes for the gods themselves. To the ancient Egyptians, temples were living, breathing entities, divine palaces where rituals sustained the universe itself. Each temple was meticulously aligned with astronomical and geographical precision, reflecting deep cosmic symbolism. Massive pylons formed imposing gateways, leading into open courtyards and colonnaded halls, which in turn gave way to the most sacred sanctum, the naos, where the statue of the god rested, hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. Only priests, purified through rigorous rituals, could enter these inner sanctums and commune with the divine essence housed within. Priests were not merely religious figures but vital functionaries who ensured the god's favor and maintained cosmic balance. Their duties were demanding and precise. They shaved their heads, bathed several times a day, and wore linen garments free of impurities. Their routines were as regimented as those of soldiers, for any lapse could disrupt Ma'at and invite chaos. Before dawn, they would enter the temple, awaken the god's statue with hymns, cleanse and clothe it, and offer food and incense. These acts were not symbolic alone, they were believed to literally sustain the gods, who in turn sustained the world. Beyond the priests, Specialized temple staff, singers, dancers, artisans, and scribes, played roles in festivals and daily rituals. Their performances, adorned in elaborate costumes and accompanied by sacred music, brought divine myths to life during public ceremonies. Though ordinary citizens could not access the gods directly, grand processions carried deities out of their temples on feast days. Statues mounted on barks sailed along the Nile or were paraded through streets, allowing the populace to witness and revere their protectors. Among the pantheon of Egyptian gods, each deity held dominion over aspects of life and nature. Ra, whose fiery journey across the sky symbolized the eternal struggle between light and darkness, was revered as the king of gods. Osiris, ruler of the afterlife, offered hope of rebirth. Isis embodied motherhood and magical healing, while Anubis guided souls through the perilous pathways of death. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, presided over writing and knowledge. The people's devotion extended to local gods as well, who safeguarded towns and regions with equal vigilance. Religious festivals, infused with pageantry and collective joy, punctuated the calendar year. Events such as the Feast of Opet celebrated the renewal of the pharaoh's power. During the beautiful Festival of the Valley, families honored their deceased relatives by visiting their tombs, sharing meals, and offering prayers, reinforcing the connection between the living and the dead. The vibrancy of these festivals brought respite from daily toil and reaffirmed the unity of communities under the watchful eyes of the gods. Despite the splendor and comfort these temples projected, they were not immune to the passage of time or shifts in political fortunes. Dynasties rose and fell, foreign rulers came and went, yet temples remained as steadfast guardians of tradition. Even when certain gods faded from prominence or foreign deities entered the Egyptian pantheon, the essence of worship, that the divine was ever present and must be honored, endured. In the spiritual heart of Egypt, temples stood as silent witnesses to generations of hopes, fears, triumphs, and losses. Their walls whispered prayers in hieroglyphs and bore depictions of rituals that transcended mortal lives. For in ancient Egypt, faith was not confined to belief alone. It was woven into every breath, every sunrise, every harvest, and every heartbeat, ensuring that the gods' eternal vigil would never falter. In the land of ancient Egypt, life was viewed not as a fleeting moment, but as a prelude to something far greater. To the Egyptians, death was not the end. It was a gateway, a profound transition into an everlasting existence. Preparing for this journey became not just a religious duty, but a central pillar of life itself. The journey to the afterlife was thought to be fraught with peril and uncertainty. Beyond death's veil lay the Duat, a mystical underworld filled with gods, monsters, and challenges. Navigating this realm successfully would lead to the Field of Reeds, a paradise mirroring the ideal version of Egypt, where loved ones reunited and joy endured forever. Yet, failure meant obliteration or eternal unrest. Thus, to secure safe passage, careful and elaborate preparations began long before death knocked. Mummification stood at the heart of these preparations. Rooted in religious and symbolic beliefs, this meticulous process aimed to preserve the body so the Ka, the vital essence or life force, could recognize and reunite with it. Without the body's preservation, the soul risked wandering, lost in darkness for eternity. The embalming process was sacred and methodical. First, the body was cleansed and purified with water, often taken from the Nile itself. Organs susceptible to decay, the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver, were carefully removed and stored in canopic jars, each protected by a specific deity known as the Four Sons of Horus. The brain, seen as insignificant in contrast to the heart, was often discarded through the nostrils using specialized hooks. Next, the body was dehydrated using natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture that absorbed moisture and halted decay. This drying process lasted for weeks. Once complete, the body was anointed with oils and resins, restoring suppleness to the skin and infusing it with sacred fragrances. Finally, linen wrappings were meticulously layered, each fold accompanied by spells and amulets meant to guard against malevolent forces. Among these charms, the scarab beetle, symbolizing rebirth, held special significance and was often placed over the heart. The funeral itself was a momentous occasion, blending sorrow with solemn reverence. Professional mourners, often women, wailed dramatically to honor the deceased and express collective grief. Priests, adorned in ceremonial garb, performed rites that included the pivotal opening of the mouth ceremony. This ritual, executed before the tomb, was believed to restore the senses of the deceased, allowing them to eat, speak, and see in the afterlife. Tombs varied greatly depending on status and wealth. Pharaohs, nobles, and high officials commissioned grand structures adorned with intricate reliefs and vibrant paintings. These scenes immortalized idealized visions of daily life, farming, feasting, hunting, and family gatherings, designed to magically come alive and serve the deceased in eternity. Tombs also held an array of grave goods, furniture, food, clothing, jewelry, and even model servants known as ashabtis, who were intended to perform labor on behalf of the dead in the afterlife. For ordinary Egyptians, simpler tombs or communal burial sites sufficed, yet the intention remained the same. Even the humblest individuals strove to ensure proper rites were observed. Loved ones continued their devotion long after burial, visiting graves with offerings and prayers, ensuring that the dead remained nourished and remembered. Underlying every ritual and belief was the concept of Ma'at. In the afterlife, the deceased would stand before Osiris, the lord of the underworld. There, their heart would be weighed against the feather of truth. A virtuous life ensured balance. The heart would not betray them with heaviness born from sin. Should the scales tip unfavorably, the monstrous Ammit, part crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, would devour the unworthy, condemning them to oblivion. Yet, for those who upheld Ma'at, an eternity of bliss awaited. They would dwell among gods and ancestors, forever embraced by the gentle winds and fertile fields of the eternal paradise they had spent a lifetime preparing to enter. Though the body rested in its tomb and loved ones mourned in the world above, the soul's odyssey had only just begun. In the deep silence of the night, shielded from mortal eyes, the deceased entered the Duat, the shadowy realm of the dead. This was no place of simple darkness or eternal sleep. The Duat was a landscape as vivid, treacherous, and wondrous as Egypt itself, filled with gods, demons, and magical rivers flowing beneath the earth. To ancient Egyptians, the Duat was both a trial and a promise. Its geography was described in texts such as the Ambient and the Book of Gates, which decorated tomb walls and coffins, providing vital guidance for the soul's perilous passage. These books served not merely as prayers but as maps, illuminating each hour of the soul's journey through the 12 gates corresponding to the 12 hours of night. Upon entering, the soul encountered landscapes that defied earthly understanding. Lakes of fire blazed alongside fields of reeds, and rivers teemed with serpents of unimaginable size. Gates barred progress, guarded by monstrous beings whose names the soul was required to know and recite. Only by demonstrating knowledge, purity, and divine favor could these barriers be passed. Here, ignorance was as deadly as evil. Without the proper spells, charms, and passwords, many inscribed on tomb walls or written on papyrus scrolls placed within the coffin, the soul risked becoming trapped or destroyed. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and protector of graves, played a crucial role as a guide through this bewildering realm. Silent yet vigilant, he escorted the soul toward the Hall of Two Truths, where the most critical trial awaited. This chamber was presided over by Osiris, enthroned as the Lord of the Afterlife, surrounded by 42 divine judges. Each represented one of the universal sins the deceased must deny committing, from theft and blasphemy to dishonoring parents, or polluting the river. At the heart of this judgment stood the weighing of the heart. Balanced against the feather of Ma'at, the heart revealed the soul's true nature. Should it be found lighter or equal in weight, the soul would be declared pure. Horus, often depicted as offering protection, stood nearby, while Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, recorded the verdict with divine precision. Success meant ascension to paradise, where all desires would be fulfilled in a land of eternal harvest and family reunions. Failure, however, spelled doom. If the heart proved heavy with guilt and imbalance, it would be cast to Ammit, the devourer. Part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus, Ammit consumed the unworthy, erasing them from existence in what was feared as the second death. For Egyptians, this was the greatest terror, as oblivion severed one from the cycle of rebirth and from loved ones forever. Yet the belief in success was deeply ingrained. Every step of funeral preparations, every offering, every whispered prayer served to tip the scales toward favor. The living worked tirelessly to equip the dead with what they needed, not just physical offerings, but spiritual armor crafted through devotion and tradition. Once deemed worthy, the soul continued on its path. Crossing through the final gates, it emerged in the field of reeds, a divine mirror of Egypt's own lush floodplains. Here, fields ripened without labor, cool waters refreshed the spirit, and serenity reigned. Loved ones who had passed before greeted the new arrival, and the soul was free to enjoy eternity in a land untouched by sorrow or time. Thus, the Duat was not merely a dark abyss of judgment. It was a sacred road, filled with trials that tested the soul's integrity and understanding. For the ancient Egyptians, this journey offered hope, a chance for renewal, for reward, and ultimately, for everlasting life beneath the eternal gaze of the gods. While the soul ventured boldly through the Duat, the body remained at rest, nestled within carefully prepared tombs that dotted the Egyptian landscape. To the ancient Egyptians, the tomb was not simply a burial place. It was the eternal house, a sacred vessel to protect the body and ensure that memory and legacy would endure across endless ages. From the modest pit graves of the earliest periods to the grandeur of pyramids and rock-cut chambers, tombs evolved alongside Egyptian civilization itself. In these eternal homes, architecture, art, and symbolism converged to serve a singular purpose: the guarantee of immortality. In the dawn of the Old Kingdom, pyramids emerged as the supreme expression of royal power and divine connection. Towering over the desert sands, these monumental structures were not merely feats of engineering. They embodied the pharaoh's aspiration to ascend to the heavens and join the gods. The most iconic of them all, the Great Pyramid of Giza, stood as a testament to Pharaoh Khufu's ambition and the organizational might of his kingdom. Tens of thousands of workers, overseen by skilled architects and engineers, toiled for years, driven by loyalty and religious zeal. Together, they shaped millions of limestone blocks into a structure that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Yet, as the centuries passed and Egypt entered the Middle and New Kingdoms, the design of royal tombs shifted. Vulnerable to tomb robbers and exposed to the harsh elements, massive pyramids gave way to hidden chambers carved deep into cliffs. In Thebes, in a place later known as the Valley of the Kings, pharaohs like the Mosai and Ramses II commissioned tombs meant to confound and deter intruders. These secretive passageways twisted and turned, adorned with vivid wall paintings that recounted divine journeys and magic spells to aid the deceased. Art within these tombs served more than decorative purposes. Scenes depicted the deceased offering gifts to the gods, embracing loved ones, or partaking in eternal feasts. Hieroglyphic inscriptions from funerary texts guided the soul through the Duat, while magical formulas protected against dangers lurking in the afterlife. Every brushstroke, every carved symbol was infused with profound meaning, intended to transcend the limits of mortal existence. For nobles and officials, too, tombs became statements of piety and prestige. Mastabas, flat-roofed, rectangular structures, housed the bodies of high-ranking individuals, offering chapels where families and priests could leave offerings and recite prayers. In these elegant spaces, vibrant murals showcased earthly achievements and idealized visions of the good life, reinforcing the hope that such pleasures would continue in eternity. Even common people, though limited by resources, aspired to create lasting memorials. Simple graves and modest stone markers were often accompanied by stelae inscribed with prayers. Families maintained ancestral tombs for generations, visiting regularly to present offerings and keep the memory of the departed alive. Beyond tombs themselves, colossal monuments such as obelisks and temples extended the reach of legacy. These towering stone pillars, often erected in pairs at temple entrances, symbolized rays of the sun and stood as eternal witnesses to divine favor and royal greatness. Temples like Karnak and Luxor not only honored gods but celebrated the enduring reigns of the pharaohs who commissioned them, their names etched in stone to be remembered for millennia. For the ancient Egyptians, to be forgotten was the true death. Thus, they built with eternity in mind. They inscribed prayers begging future generations to speak their names, believing that memory sustained the soul in the afterlife. Tombs and monuments were crafted to withstand not just the ravages of time but the indifference of history itself. In this land where the boundary between life and death blurred, the eternal house stood as a silent guardian of dreams, achievements, and devotion. Through art, architecture, and ritual, the Egyptians ensured that the dead would not vanish into oblivion but would dwell forever in the hearts of gods and men alike. In ancient Egypt, where every aspect of existence was touched by divine forces, magic and medicine stood side by side, woven tightly into the fabric of daily life and the passage to the afterlife. The Egyptians did not view magic, known as Heka, as a dark or forbidden art. On the contrary, it was considered a divine gift bestowed at the dawn of creation, a force that animated the world and maintained harmony. Without Heka, gods could not perform their roles, nor could humanity hope to overcome the threats of illness, misfortune, and death. Magicians and priests were often indistinguishable in their duties. These learned men, steeped in ritual and tradition, wielded Heka to protect, heal, and guide. Amulets, spells, and rituals were their tools. Crafted from stone, faience, or precious metals, amulets were worn from cradle to grave. The eye of Horus guarded health and safety, the ankh symbolized life, and the scarab beetle represented regeneration. Mothers hung charms near sleeping infants, farmers buried them in fields for protection, and travelers carried them on dangerous journeys. Each charm, inscribed with sacred words, was believed to channel divine energy. Magic infused every corner of existence. During childbirth, spells invoked Tauret and Bes, fierce deities who shielded mothers and infants from malevolent spirits. In times of illness, prayers were uttered alongside practical remedies. Physicians, often priests themselves, blended magical incantations with surprisingly advanced medical knowledge. They set bones, stitched wounds, treated infections with honey, and used herbs for everything from indigestion to labor pains. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical text dating to around 1550 BC, revealed the Egyptians' remarkable understanding of the human body and disease. While some prescriptions relied on superstition, many demonstrated practical wisdom. Castor oil soothed digestive troubles, willow bark eased pain, and moldy bread, unknowingly containing natural antibiotics, was applied to wounds. Physicians categorized ailments and specialized in different areas, from dentistry to eye care, offering a level of professional knowledge rare in the ancient world. Yet, despite these advancements, the unseen remained paramount. Illness was often perceived as the work of malevolent spirits or divine displeasure. Treatment, therefore, required both earthly and spiritual intervention. Rituals to drive out demons or appeal to gods accompanied physical healing. The line between priest, healer, and magician blurred, unified by the goal of restoring balance, ma'at, to the afflicted. Magic extended beyond health and survival. In matters of love, protection, justice, and revenge, spells and rituals played critical roles. Individuals commissioned love charms, placed curses on enemies, and sought divine intervention through oracles and dream interpretation. Dreams, in particular, were windows to the divine. Temples dedicated to healing gods such as Imhotep, a deified architect and physician, became centers where the sick slept in hopes of receiving prophetic visions guiding their recovery. As life approached its inevitable end, magical preparations intensified. Funerary texts like the Book of the Dead provided spells to overcome obstacles in the afterlife. Priests recited these incantations during embalming, burial, and tomb dedication ceremonies. Magic was not seen as cheating death but as a sacred bridge that allowed the soul to navigate perils beyond mortal comprehension. Even kings relied heavily on Heka. Royal inscriptions spoke of divine protection through magic. Pharaohs were often depicted wielding scepters and symbols imbued with mystical power. Their very coronation rituals invoked ancient spells, reaffirming their role as earthly conduits between gods and people. In the grand tapestry of Egyptian life, magic was neither mysterious nor marginal. It was a vital thread, ensuring that life's fragile balance endured. From the humble villager seeking protection from scorpions to the mighty pharaoh safeguarding his passage into eternity, Heka whispered constantly in the winds of the Nile, promising that through knowledge, devotion, and faith, no soul would face the unknown alone. For more than 2 millennia, Egypt had stood as a beacon of stability and grandeur. Its monuments pierced the sky, its rulers claimed divine favor, and its people lived and died guided by eternal principles. But even the most enduring civilizations are not immune to change. As centuries passed, the mighty kingdom by the Nile began to face forces beyond its control, both from within and without, that slowly chipped away at its once unshakable foundations. The seeds of decline were sown in gradual shifts. Internal strife, economic troubles, and faltering central power began to weaken the authority of the pharaohs. During the first and second intermediate periods, rival dynasties and foreign rulers vied for control. The Hyksos, a people of mixed Semitic origin, seized the Nile Delta during the second intermediate period and introduced new technologies, including horse-drawn chariots and composite bows. Though eventually expelled, their rule left a mark, forcing Egypt to adapt militarily and politically. The new kingdom, which followed, ushered in a brief resurgence of imperial strength and cultural flourishing. Pharaohs like Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and Ramses II expanded Egypt's borders and filled its temples with treasures. Yet, this golden age too was fragile. As external pressures mounted, Egypt's influence began to wane. The Hittites, Assyrians, and later the enigmatic Sea Peoples battered its territories and trade routes. By the end of the New Kingdom, Egypt found itself increasingly isolated and vulnerable. Foreign domination soon became a recurring reality. Libyan chieftains, Nubian kings from Kush, Assyrian invaders, and eventually the Persians all imposed their rule over the ancient land. Although these conquerors often adopted Egyptian customs and portrayed themselves as rightful pharaohs, each occupation eroded Egypt's autonomy. Temples continued to function, priests performed their sacred rites, and the common people maintained traditions, but the heartbeat of imperial Egypt grew faint. Hope for restoration flickered briefly under native dynasties like the 26th, who revived art, architecture, and military ambition. But Egypt's glory days were already memories carved in fading hieroglyphs. In 332 BC, a decisive moment arrived with the conquest of Alexander the Great. To many Egyptians, this Macedonian warrior seemed a liberator from Persian rule. He embraced local customs, was declared son of Ammonius at the Oracle of Siwa, and founded the city of Alexandria, destined to become a jewel of Hellenistic culture. Yet Alexander's death brought new foreign rulers, the Ptolemies. This Greek dynasty, which lasted nearly 3 centuries, intertwined Egyptian and Hellenistic traditions in fascinating ways. Ptolemaic rulers presented themselves as pharaohs, commissioned temples, and participated in ancient rituals. Cleopatra VII, the last of this line, famously aligned herself with Rome in a desperate bid to preserve Egypt's independence. But following her defeat and suicide in 30 BC, Egypt became a Roman province, its sovereignty extinguished. Under Roman rule and later Byzantine administration, Egypt's ancient religion slowly faded. Temples, once vibrant centers of worship, fell silent. Christianity, spreading rapidly through the empire, supplanted old beliefs. By the 4th century CE, imperial edicts outlawed pagan practices. The Temple of Philae, among the last strongholds of the old gods, closed its doors. The voices of priests and the sacred smoke of offerings disappeared into history. Yet even in decline, Egypt's legacy proved indelible. Its art, wisdom, and mystique captivated conquerors, scholars, and travelers. Roman emperors decorated their villas with Egyptian motifs. Renaissance thinkers sought the secrets of pyramids and hieroglyphs. The Rosetta Stone, rediscovered in 1799, would eventually unlock the language of the ancients, breathing new life into their silent monuments. Though the twilight had fallen and the gods' temples crumbled, the spirit of ancient Egypt endured. Carved in stone, written on papyrus, and whispered through generations, its story lived on, a civilization that, while mortal, aspired always to the eternal. Though ancient Egypt's last priestly chants faded centuries ago, and its mighty temples now stand in silent reverence beneath layers of sand and stone, the civilization's essence continues to pulse quietly through the veins of human culture. The story of Egypt did not vanish with Cleopatra's fall, nor did it end with the sealing of tombs and the crumbling of obelisks. Instead, it transformed, becoming legend, becoming memory, becoming an eternal presence in the collective consciousness of the world. In many ways, Egypt was the world's first great storyteller. Its monuments were books of stone, and its temples were theaters of myth and devotion. Pharaohs etched their triumphs into walls, confident that words carved into limestone could outlast fragile papyrus and fleeting breath. Gods were not only worshipped but narrated, their tales woven into the cycle of the seasons, the rise and fall of the Nile, and the triumphs and failures of humanity. Even as Christianity spread and ancient rituals faded, echoes of Egyptian belief and practice subtly found new forms. Saints and angels took on protective roles once held by deities like Isis and Horus. Festivals tied to natural cycles remained in new guises. The idea of judgment after death, so central to the weighing of the heart, remained deeply embedded in religious thought across many cultures. In this way, the wisdom and fears of ancient Egypt found strange and lasting afterlives. Centuries after the last pharaoh was entombed, Europe fell under the spell of Egypt's mystique. Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato traveled to Egyptian temples in search of wisdom. Roman emperors decorated their gardens and monuments with obelisks, symbols of a power they both admired and envied. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, knowledge of hieroglyphs faded, yet Egypt became the focus of fascination and wonder, often shrouded in myth more than fact. The true rebirth of Egypt's voice came in the modern era, when scholars and explorers braved harsh deserts and deciphered long-forgotten scripts. The 1799 discovery of the Rosetta Stone during Napoleon's expedition became a turning point. Through the tireless work of Jean-François Champollion, hieroglyphs, once dismissed as mere decorative symbols, revealed their secrets, allowing the silent prayers, poetry, and records of ancient Egyptians to speak once more. The treasures uncovered in the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 by Howard Carter captured the world's imagination, igniting a phenomenon dubbed Egyptomania. Gold masks, delicate jewelry, and murals untouched for millennia offered a glimpse into a world both intimate and majestic. Newspapers, films, and museums carried the magic of ancient Egypt to every corner of the globe. What had been buried deep beneath the sands now glowed in electric lights and vitrines, inspiring awe in new generations. Today, the legacy of ancient Egypt stretches far beyond the confines of museums and academic halls. Its art influences architecture and design. Its symbols, like the ankh and the scarab, continue to adorn jewelry and tattoos, carrying meanings of life, rebirth, and protection. Films, novels, and video games weave Egypt's gods, myths, and monuments into modern narratives, keeping alive the allure of this civilization born so many thousands of years ago. More importantly, Egypt's most profound legacy may be its view of time and eternity. The ancient Egyptians taught that life was but one phase of a much grander journey. Death, they believed, was not to be feared but to be prepared for, a passage into a realm where the soul could thrive forever if one lived with honor, kindness, and reverence for the balance of the world. In this sense, Egypt achieved what its kings and priests had always desired. Though their bodies returned to dust and their temples crumbled, they remain eternal. Their voices, once carried by sacred chants and written in delicate strokes of ink and chisel, continue to echo through time. From birth to afterlife, from the first dawn by the Nile to the digital age of today, Egypt's story is not merely remembered, it lives. And so, our journey through ancient Egypt ends, but its story lives on. From the cradle of the Nile to the secrets of the afterlife, echoes of this timeless world still surround us. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe for more forgotten histories, and share your favorite part in the comments. Thank you for watching, and until next time, sleep well and let the past guide your dreams.